This is a question we get a lot of, I think. How do we look at the CapEx spending of AI that is currently going on? What would be your take and view of that, Bill?
Well, it's a space race is the way I like to think of it. And back when we were in a space race with Russia, it's amazing to think back about how much that influenced our attitudes, but it also caused a lot of interesting technology to get developed. The willingness of two countries to just pour massive resources into that for only really to say that they were the one that did it. I mean, later on we participated together with them on some space related stuff.
Yeah,
and so that's where I'm at.
Okay. So I think the things that jump out to me on the question. So, and we're doing some work on this. This is for a talk I'm doing this week, but it's a talk that I'm going to do at our Investor Oasis. Is my plan for kind of a bigger talk on this. Is we look back at, and there was some data, Paul Kudrowski out online had posted some of this, so I appreciate him sharing this information, but he had showed what the CapEx to GDP was of the railroads in the 1880s.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, that's a good data point. There's a couple other studies that look back at the CapEx tied to telecoms in the late 1990s. And what I find really interesting, and this might be the game, just so everybody's aware, I think this might be the game. But we're right now, if you look at the level of CapEx among the AI hyperscalers, it's at the same level as the telecoms were in the late 1990s. And obviously, like as you watch Zuckerberg sit down with the president, he's like, like 600 billion, and then he turns to the president and said, I didn't know which number you wanted, right?
Yeah.
So I say that because
Lucent was the.
Let me finish. Let me finish. So we're right now at the level of CapEx that has been historically significant, is what I think about, and. So again, and I'll give I'm going to throw out some props to some various research groups out there. So in the 1880s saga, if you go look, Barini Associates, they provided us some interesting work on the oldest stock index out there that people reference is what they call the Cowless Index. It goes back prior to the creation of the Dow or even the S&P 500. And the Cowless Index, is it's effective from 1870 on. And Barini did some work on tracking the railroads from 1870 to 2000 off of this work. And it kind of reminds me of like the stocks of the long run argument where Siegel was like, see, if you bought at the top of the Nifty 50, you almost outperformed the stock market the following 25 years. And it's like, that's cool if I'm an academic, but you're in my job. Like, we can't do that because we'll get fired. So if someone like walked in 1870 and said, listen, there's going to be a boom in railroads. We're going to do, railroads going to be so important to America. And 130 years later, you're almost going to beat the average stock.
Yeah.
It's like 130 years later.
Yeah. Well,
that's it's historically significant. I'll let you go on with what you were going to say a second ago because I'll come off of that.
Yeah. So in 99, Lucent became the 7th largest cap company in the world.
Yeah.
And in the year 99, half their revenue was selling equipment for people to provide the Internet of Things, and because the Internet was going to change our life, was borrowed from them. They
provided credit.
They provided credit on half of their revenue, and of course that collapsed, and Lucent collapsed.
Yeah.
So just think about it. They went from being the 7th largest cap company in the world, and that brings me around to why I'm so interested in these two books to connect these two time periods. Here's my concern about today, and I know I sound like an old fuddy-duddy to say this, but the stock market and the wealth that's owned and the behaviors of the people that own the common stocks in the United States is more powerful than any of those two prior junctures. In other words, it was one thing for the dot-com bubble. I just read the part where eBay stock has now gone from, being priced at, say, $20 to $648 in 2 years. That was owned and participated in a narrow group of people. It wasn't widely dispersed through all the economy, but just the same, it caused the stock market to be a total disaster.
But it's the closest analogous period to today.
It's the closest analogous period to today, but the difference in 1929, only 1.5% of the population of the United States owned a common stock. In 1999, lots of people owned common stocks, but nowhere near as importantly and spread as wide as it is now with 401k plans.
Well, but if you look at the household net worth by the St. Louis Fed, it's 5% different as a percentage of net worth.
The common stock?
Yeah. The equities as a percentage of household household financial assets. Pardon me. It's 5% higher than 99, which is the highest it's ever been.
It's highest it's ever been, but more important, it will be more closely tied to the psyche of the consumer than it has been before.
Correct. But consumer of the owner, which the owner is a boomer.
But there's other things connected to it, though, that didn't exist in 99 and didn't exist in 1929. There was no passive index investing of any meaningful amount in 1999.
Correct.
Right? That's all come to pass by...
well, the original advocates of that were like Motley Fool. They'd say, like, go buy the
Motley
passive
Fool
index.
and Jack Bogle's development of the S&P 500 index for Vanguard. Well, today there is a whole religion around accepting that fact, providing participation at the lowest possible cost under the assumption that the market will never have a long enough period of doing lousy to punish people for doing that.
Yeah.
And the problem is that 1929 to 1941 would have completely destroyed that. And 99 to 09 did a pretty good job of backing it off. And so it'll be interesting to see how far this one gets backed off.
When if you look at the concentration of the stock market, historically, again, you went from railroads in the late 19th century to industrials being the dominant feature of the stock market. So like what really got drubbed in the 20s would have been industrial style, like the RCAs.
Well, Ford was a glamour stock in the 20s.
So I say that because I don't think about it the same way, because ultimately it's where's the problem, and the problem's actually not that broad. When I say if you look among the constituents, it's not very broad. There's a lot of losers among the constituents. To your point, the dollar-weighted nature is risky.
Well, the multiplier effect on this spending is dramatically higher than the multiplier effect on normal spending.
I don't necessarily agree with that.
There's 10 cars parked at the brand new house being built in our neighborhood each morning. Okay, and I can tell you that.
But that's among, again, winners and losers. That's among wealthy people.
But the 50 to 80-year-olds have become wealthy in many cases.
Agreed,
because
but they don't drive consumption in the economy though. They are the least consumptive compared to, there was I say it because I'm 41 years old. I am the consumer.
Yeah.
I'm roughly the consumer. I'm not a perfect picture of the consumer, but I'm the consumer from an age perspective. And yes, to your point, am I likely to, as an age group, is my age group likely to be involved in the stock market? Yes. At the same time, is this the first time we've had degenerate 40-year-olds gambling in the stock market? No, we had that in 1999.
They picked on Reagan because he called it trickle-down economics. There's more trickling down than we've ever had. And it's my opinion that will be a big problem at some point in time, because if the thing that, like you're using the CapEx with the AI, anything that breaks the back of those 10 or 20 largest cap companies is going to break the back of the S&P passive index for an extended period of time.
The only problem is it doesn't line up with the labor, because if you think about the average constituent, they're more likely to align with the labor, right? So like if you're working at some 2-bit bank that's publicly traded, wherever in the country, that's where more of the labor sits, is in smaller businesses.
Yes.
So and they're starved for capital relative to these things.
But
so in other words, like if let's say the big things do poorly, that doesn't hurt everyone, and the dispersion of capital is actually what's needed for the average laborer.
Well, I'm glad I'm glad you're an optimist, because we need to be optimists. What I'm saying is that if you look at history, there's never an uninterrupted.
But like, here's an example. Nortel was part of the same Lucent game. They provided credit.
Yep.
If you look at the capex of telecoms, it went from 120 billion to less than 60 billion within 2 years. So again, to your point, the stock market's not very good at predicting capex, future capex. They really suck at it. Sorry, Mr. Market. I'm here to offend you. They suck at predicting capex. Nortel was bankrupt and closed within 9 years. Yeah. So now, did that matter? No, it did matter.
Well, when it's $6 trillion companies,
it was a $180 billion business then. That was one of the $1 trillion sized companies at the time.
I understand.
And with nine years, it didn't matter.
It will matter if it hits the Magnificent Seven. It's going to matter.
Yeah,
immensely.